This looks amazing. Look at this. What game is this? Cities Skylines? Crazy. The detail, the color, the richness, everything. It's so crazy. Is that a roundabout? That's a roundabout. I can make beautiful roundabouts in this game. Yeah, I'm getting it. I'm getting Cities Skylines. Let's load it up. Well, I'm in Cities Skylines, and I'm going to be honest, this is a bit underwhelming compared to those screenshots I was looking at earlier. The colors are all kind of desaturated looking. There's this foggy haze over everything. The roads don't look the same. They're very, like, bleached gray. The textures leave something to be desired, too. This is not what those other screenshots looked like. Today, we're going to explore why that is, how to fix it. You just need a couple mods to tweak your game to make it look like those cool screenshots that you see on Reddit or Instagram, things like that. Everyone, I'm Yumble. I appreciate you being here. Let's check out how to make your visuals great in Cities Skylines. So you're here because your Cities Skylines game looks bad and you kind of feel bad. But that's okay, we've all been there. We've all had to kind of learn the current climate of how to change your game and the mods that are out now that help you solve these problems. And believe me, the mods have changed recently. A lot of these mods have, a lot of the older standbys have become outdated. The new ones have replaced them and consolidated them. All of the new mods are contained in my mod list in the Steam Workshop. So I have a collection that I'll link in the description that lists all the mods that I use. But first, before we even get into the mods that change your visuals, I want to explain something real quick. There are two parts of the workshop. If you have the game on Steam, you can just subscribe to these. It's very easy. I strongly recommend getting the game on Steam. I cannot support you if you don't have the game on Steam, is the reality. So go to the workshop, the main workshop page for Cities Skylines. Go down to Map Themes. There's two things that we're going to talk about right now before getting into the mods. Map Themes and Color Correction LUTs. So first, Map Themes, a main part of the workshop. Let's do most popular for the last year. Something like that usually gives a good kind of sampling. Now, what a map theme actually is, Lush Coast is a map theme. It is a texture pack that determines the textures that your game is going to show when representing different areas. So for instance, we've got the grass area, we've got the ruined type ground, we've got what looks to be gravel is a thing, sand is a thing, the way your cliffs look. So these are just the textures. It's a texture pack that shows how the game represents different features of your map. I recommend getting a small sample of these to start. They're usually pretty large files, but they really don't take up that much space in-game. I could be wrong about that too, but it's okay. Get a couple of map themes for starters. So like get a Lush Coast, get a TDW makes great stuff. Do most popular all time and look at what's there, right? Clyra, a lot of people like that. Montebello, Homecoming, pretty much all of the Stray Cats Territory stuff by Rafa is really good looking. Some of them are 4K, Cedar Valley 4K, beautiful. Laviante, classic, a lot of people use that. So grab a couple of LUTs, because later we'll be able to blend those textures together. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So anyway, before we get into that, go back a few pages, go down to Color Correction LUTs. LUT stands for Lookup Table, and it's basically a filter for how the game displays colors. If you're familiar with like color grading a video, it's exactly like that. It is a sort of post-process for the visuals in your game, and it can drastically change the way stuff looks. I have one called Coastal Mountain. Apparently, I don't remember why I have this one, but some map themes recommend certain LUTs with their textures. Everyone has a different idea of how bright their textures should be, and different LUTs handle things different. So balance LUT is meant to look a certain way. It's just a filter for how the game looks. I wish there was a before and after option. This one tends to be really dark. I don't necessarily recommend Sunday Color. But same thing here. Go to most popular for the last year or most popular all time, and you'll see a lot of kind of classic LUTs that people have. I recommend grabbing a few of these. They tend to be very small in size. Relight is quite good, so get like more Relight LUTs or any of the Relight LUTs. Very, very good, because you can try all of them out. You can only use one at a time, but you can try each of them on your build and see how they look. Great. We've got map themes, we've got LUTs. Let's check out the actual mods we're going to be using today. I think the holy trinity of visual mods are as follows. Ready? Get these. Theme Mixer 2, Render It, and Play It. Play It is not really a visuals mod, but it replaces Ultimate Eye Candy. So that's right, I'm saying get rid of Ultimate Eye Candy, and I'd also recommend, if you're getting these mods, get rid of Daylight Classic as well. Also, get rid of Relight. Honestly, like there's these dinosaur mods that we're all still using. These mods replace it with enhanced functionality. So feel free to remove those mods I just mentioned in favor of Theme Mixer, which, as the title implies, lets you mix the themes together. So you can pick your map theme. Remember how I listed off Stray Cats Territory stuff? Like, these are some good-looking themes. You can change your map theme on the fly in-game, which is fantastic, but you can also mix the themes together, as the name also implies. So you've got this bank of buttons on the left. I'll show you in-game in a little bit, I think, but you can change the texture. You can borrow the texture from one theme, and you can borrow the ruined texture from another, and the gravel from another, and the cliff. So you can make a fully customized kind of set of themes that work together to make a more original finished product, right? So that's just how you get your textures squared away. Really, really nice. It also gives you environment controls, where you can control the, like how the water looks. You can control, here we go. The exposure is very important, exposure setting. You can control the declination of the sun size, so that gives you some lighting controls as well. So Theme Mixer 2 is the first of the holy trinity of visuals mods. Then get Render It, which I mentioned earlier. Render It gives you a full kind of post-production suite for your visuals. It handles aliasing for you, it handles shading, handles shadows, handles rendering in general, the type of rendering that your game is going to use. You can save profiles in all of these mods as well. You can save a preset. And there's also an advanced section within the mod that lets you change everything. You can just change all of the way that your game renders things, and the overall brightness is best done in Render It. So I also recommend getting rid of post-process effects if you use post-process effects. Read the descriptions of all of these mods, just to be clear. You don't need Shadow Strength Adjuster anymore. You don't need sharp textures. You don't need post-process effects. These are all included and enhanced within Render It. Play It. The reason I recommend Play It is because it replaces Ultimate Eye Candy. So just like this picture shows here, the day-night speed and the time of day, those were a function of Ultimate Eye Candy. When you get rid of Ultimate Eye Candy in favor of Render It and Theme Mixer 2, you'll want that additional functionality. It's been broken off into Play It, where you can change the weather, you can change the time of day, fog intensity, cloud intensity. There's another mod that I have that I like a lot that handles that, as long as it's not... Yeah, it's fine. No compatibility issues there, so that's cool. Another one, Environment Changer plus Improved Theme Selection. This is an old mod, but it checks out. As far as I can tell, it still works very well. You can just do broad sweeping changes to your whole city. If you want to change your map to a winter map before creating a new game, temperate, boreal, tropical, European, so you can change the entire environment right when you're loading. So this is the loading screen. You can flip the map theme to whatever you want. So I recommend keeping this around just for that little bit of added flexibility. All right, let's get crazy. Dynamic resolution. If you have a great computer and you're okay making it hot enough to fry an egg on top of it, then dynamic resolution is for you. I run my game at 150% resolution. I forget what the actual resolution numbers are for that, but I'm running it at 150%. That means that it's running at... the final resolution is 1080p, but it's being rendered at 150% of 1080p. That gives it just looks way better. Like the game overall, it just looks way better. It's like watching a 4K video on a 1080p TV. It still makes a difference, right? So if you're rendering at a higher resolution than your display is showing natively, there is a perceivable difference, and it just looks so much better. So if you wanna heat up your computer, use this one. I believe it's F10, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, F10 or left control plus R to open up the window, if you're curious about where that is once you get into the game. But dynamic resolution is beautiful if your PC can afford it resource-wise. So that's great. Ultimate level of detail is crucial. This one determines the render distance of objects. So you know how you zoom in and out and you'll see that things kind of change in appearance? I'll show you in a little bit, but you can change where that change occurs. So as you're scrolling around, you may notice that trees and buildings they look kind of distant, and then suddenly they pop into their full res version. They go from a low res version to a high res version. This is just that. This determines the distance that prop level of detail distance occurs. So at 1,000 meters, the game default, the props will pop into full resolution as you zoom in on them. So that is just a big fundamental change. Ultimate level of detail, another old mod, but it still checks out. Fog controller is great. Here's another one. I use fog controller. You can change the fog visibility. You can also use classic fog within this to enable the cube map replacer, which is how you get different skies. So the mod is called Cube Map Replacer. I don't tend to use it anymore because I think the game looks pretty good as is, but Fog Controller just gives you that functionality, and you can really, like, this one shows a before and after kind of vibe. I think that this would be after because there's no fog, which is how I like to play. Here's the default fog, very hazy. Maybe it's realistic to some, but I'd rather see the game with a bit more clarity, personally. The last one, last but not least, this is not a dramatic change to the way your textures look, but it's a dramatic change to the UI of your game, or the user interface. So UI resolution makes your game go from, here is, there's no before or after, but that's okay, that's okay. The UI is all of these panels. So if you see the panel in the top left corner there, the bar across the bottom, this, compared to most people's games, the UI looks very small, which means that the actual visuals can take up more space. So you can make these elements smaller. It gives you this UI scale slider. So within your vanilla game options, under graphics, so the default place that you pop into when you open your options, it gives you a UI scale slider. You can move that up, you can move it down. I would recommend moving it down a few notches. I think I run mine at about 80 as well, if I'm not mistaken. But UI resolution makes it so those in-game elements don't take up quite so much space, and you can use that valuable real estate to contain your city that you're working on. Really crucial stuff. I'm going to open up the game and show you how I use all of these things in conjunction with one another to create a healthy visual for my game in Cities Skylines. Once you've activated the mods that I mentioned, the first thing that you'll notice is when you go to New Game, there will be this special little set of selections here. Base map theme, which the map theme determines not just the map theme, not just the visuals, but also the types of buildings that can spawn. So some people don't like the European buildings, but they like the map, and they want to spawn like the vanilla game buildings that are not European looking. You can change this to, temperate or whatever. So that gives you a little extra flexibility, plus the functionality of changing the map theme, like I mentioned earlier. These are just all the default, map themes that I'm subscribed to here. Many names that I mentioned earlier. So you can pick your overall map theme right at the beginning, but if you're using Theme Mixer, you actually don't have to. So I'm just going to start a new game at, Diamond Coast. Let's do it. Cool, we are loaded in, and already things look a lot different from the way they looked before. Still the same crummy cloverleaf, not a fan of that, but visually, it's a bit more interesting. The game's a bit brighter. I don't know if it's more realistic, but certainly changes have been made here. So I'm going to open up Theme Mixer 2. I'm keeping it in my unified UI panel here, but usually it appears down in the bottom left corner. So Theme Mixer is this symbol here, Theme Mixer 2. And this allows us to change everything. So if we want to change our theme overall, this top button, you can click that and change the theme, my God. Here's a trick / tip that I recommend doing when it comes to things looking real dark like this. Like here, I'm going to pick really anything, Cedar Valley. Let's go to the top. Let's do Homecoming. This should be a fine-looking theme. It's very dark-looking. If things look dark to you, it may be that the exposure is too low. So if things look dark, turn up the exposure and see how it looks. And there we go. So now that's online. That parameter will change possibly every time you flip this. So a way to combat that might be to use Render It, which is this symbol down here. So Render It, used in conjunction with Theme Mixer. I'm going to change the lighting. I'm going to up the lighting intensity a little bit to help combat that so I can see what these themes kind of look like before having to change the exposure on it. So right now we're very dark, but I can still get a sense of what different textures look like. And as I said earlier, everyone has a different idea of how bright their texture pack should be. There's no real standard, as far as I can tell, for brightness, so that's why there's such a broad sun intensity control in Render It, and then you combine that. I recommend keeping the sun intensity relatively low, and then turning up the, let's see, we'll go to the Atmosphere panel in Theme Mixer, and then turn up the exposure. So keep the brightness, the sun intensity low in Render It, and then change the exposure in Theme Mixer. So from there, I'll close Render It for now. Let's go to Terrain. So that second button in Theme Mixer 2, bottom left corner, this is where you can change everything individually. So right now the grass texture is, I guess probably Boreal. So the Boreal theme, I can mix in whatever grass I want. And obviously grass is very prominent on any map. So make sure you pick a decent looking grass kind of theme. But it doesn't stop there. You can mix however you want. The Ruined, which is the stuff that appears next to roads and other things, you can change the Ruined texture. It also kind of changes how the grass looks overall, because it just kind of does. The Ruined texture is behind everything. So that's all good. Gravel is its own thing. Gravel also appears next to roads, so make sure to pick a decent, or at least highway, it does. So that's your gravel. All of these can be used with Surface Painter. Surface Painter is another mod that I might recommend. It was updated recently, but you can paint all manner of these themes into areas. So that's a pretty cool function of things. But yeah, go through the settings on Theme Mixer. Make sure to go to the terrain and mix up the terrain with all those map themes that you downloaded. Make sure to go to your Atmosphere tab and make liberal use of the exposure thing. This looks terrible, whatever I have here. But make sure to make the exposure look decent before moving on. Render It has a bunch of other options too. So I'm bouncing around a bit, but Render It has your lighting options, your shadow strength options, so you can see the shadows ought change as I change this. I could be wrong. Oh, that's the moon. So the sun shadow strength. There it is. So that will change depending on how dark you want your city to look when the sun is creating shadows. There's texture settings, post-processing settings. You can toggle bloom. I found that leaving bloom on is good, and then minimizing how much bloom there is in the Advanced tab. The Advanced tab has the most stuff and the craziest stuff. Vanilla bloom doesn't look that good to me, but I recommend turning on bloom and then turning the intensity to 0.01. If you crank it, the bloom can get too intense when you're looking at buildings. That's the one thing we're not looking at right now is buildings. So there's all manner of different post-process stuff going on here. I think that the vanilla tone mapping isn't working because we're using a color correction LUT. I recommend using Theme Mixer to change your color correction in this panel here. As you can see, I should have brought this up sooner. The change is dramatic when you change the lookup table, the LUT of your map. You can do so much damage and so much good by just changing your color correction. You can use the scroll wheel to just scroll through all of them. So if you don't like how something looks overall, it could also be the LUT that's causing it, the lookup table. The default place to change this is in the options. Under graphics, color correction override, you can scroll through it here, that's the same thing. But the nice thing about doing it in Theme Mixer is that you can see your subject while you're messing with it. Dynamic resolution. I don't want to change the settings within dynamic resolution, but I want to at least show you what dynamic resolution is. So if you hit, I mentioned it earlier, if you hit F10, it brings up this panel here, dynamic resolution. I don't recommend hitting the unlock slider button. May degrade quality, don't do that. But you can change the way that your game is rendering. This looks way bright and blown out, so that might not be overly helpful, but it changes the resolution that your game is rendering at. Let's hit apply and see what happens. We just went from 150% to 200%, and it does make a difference, and my GPU fan just turned on also, just so you know. So I mentioned earlier, if you want to cook an egg on it, this is a great, on your system, it's a great way to heat your system up. I've found that 150% is totally adequate. I've also found that 100%, here's the difference between 100 and 150. This is 150. This is 100%. I found that 100%, there's a lot of aliasing going on. There's a lot of that, the steps on the corners there, the jagged lines to represent props. 150, apply, done. There's still aliasing, but the resolution has just gotten so much better. And of course, you can crank this up as high as you want, but that will affect your frame rate negatively, just to be clear. Ultimate level of detail. So you can see that the trees, there we go. These trees look a little different from these trees, and that sphere of influence based on distance changes as we roll along. You can see that the trees are popping in and out. This is the low-res version. The ones that are a little further away, that's a low-res kind of stand-in for the full resolution. Like this palm tree, let's focus in. Ready? Full res. Now it's the full res model. This is just to save on resources when you're looking into the distance rather than rendering a bunch of full polygon models. It saves on everything in your system. You can access this by going down to ultimate level of detail. Right now, all of mine are set to game defaults because I was troubleshooting, but for instance, tree level of detail, if I crank this up 1,000 meters, you'll notice our sphere just got much larger. So that render line is now pushed 1,000 meters out from the camera. It's still pretty stark, but as you make this larger, you are increasing load on your system. But yeah, that's just the principle. If you crank those up, do it at your own risk, but you can see the result on the trees. You know, that's what it is. Roads do that, cars do that, buildings do that. Everything does the same thing. The last two mods, I'll keep it short and sweet for these. Fog controller gives you kind of granular control over the fog. I think I actually turn it off using this. Oh, there's classic fog, so you can see it changes in the distance there. Edge fog, I have that turned off with another mod. But yeah, I just have it deactivated primarily. And the last mod that I use, UI resolution. So if you go to our graphics settings, yeah, I use a UI scale of 80%. So UI resolution gives you this slider that lets you change the scale of the user interface. So if you want to make your panels a bit smaller, if you want to make your info views smaller as well, turn that down to 80%. That actually helps a lot. I'm going to take a moment and go through and try to make a map theme that I'm happy with, and we'll see what the visuals look like. There we go. That's a pretty big improvement, I think. at least from the default settings or the default settings of each of these mods. Let me give you an idea of what I did, just a brief overview. The LUT here, excuse me, the theme here is Laviante 2.1. Everything is Laviante 2.1 because that's a great looking map theme. Holds up. The LUT that I'm using is the Laviante LUT as well. So I didn't do anything too custom here. But I will say an important thing to do, I've saved my setting, is to keep the intensity low in Render It. So Render It, Options, Lighting. Make sure lighting is selected and keep the intensity below 1.5. And then turn up the exposure in Theme Mixer 2. So under the Atmosphere panel, exposure in the bottom left, turn that up. So really it's a balance between those two. I also opted to not use the color grading built into Render It. It is very powerful, but because I'm using the Laviante LUT, it's kind of unnecessary. And the final thing that I really did, the last mod that I semi-recommend, is actually in the options here. It's called Road Options, or Road Color Changer ++. Kind of falls under both names. What I've done here is I darkened the roads. So here's the standard road color. Looks kind of white almost against the grass here. Use same color for all roads. I set this to probably around 100, I'd assume. Yeah, about 102, give or take, for all three sliders. But that is it. That's the... I mean, I'm not saying that this is exactly how you should do it. I'm not saying that it has to look like this, but with these mods and these concepts in mind, you can change your game massively and really get some some very diverse results and very unique results as well. So you can develop a style of your own. I'm not here to tell you what that style is, but these are the tools that I might recommend using to achieve it. Look at that, Cloverleaf strikes again. That's all I've got for today. Everyone, thank you for hanging out. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to come back and see more videos, and also feel free to come by for a live stream if you're in the neighborhood. Weekly live streams going on here. That's all I've got. I've been Yumble. I'll see you in the next stream or the next video.